Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Getting to the Bottom Line, where my goal is to help put into a new perspective the things that impact your revenue, profit, and cash flow. And I'm your host, Stephanie Smith. I am the owner of New Light Financial Solutions, and I'm excited to have with me to here today Jules White as my guest. Thank you, Jules, for coming and chatting with me this morning.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm really excited, actually.
Oh, me too, because I wanted to kick off and say that what I do for my clients is I talk to them about drivers of revenue, profit, and cash flow. And in the revenue world, a couple of the drivers are leads, getting people to know who you are, who want to do business with you, and conversion rate, getting some of those people to actually purchase from you and making sure it's a good enough rate, right, to
Mhm.
make money and make money from that. So I'm excited because two of those things are in your world of expertise, and I want to hear all about what you have to say and what you have to offer from your world that can help business owners in this area. So before we dive into that conversation, just tell me a little bit about yourself and your business and everything about what you do.
So I'm a web and SEO consultant. So I help primarily course creators, podcasters, and other women in business. And I specialize in helping them use the content that they're already creating to send more traffic to their website and make more sales. So yeah, it's all about sales and conversions and getting people to your website and actually just making sure that we make the most of what we're already doing, really. So my background is as a beauty and holistic therapist. So that was quite different, but I've always been a geek and always been involved in marketing as well. And I built my first website back in 2007. So yeah, it's things are definitely changing, and it's obviously things have evolved and changed a lot over the last few years. But I think it's really important that we still use what we can, the tools that we can, to help as much as we can, really, in our businesses.
Yeah, and I feel like with COVID and everything that happened, there's so many people starting businesses and trying to get online or trying to teach what they know in the courses and everything. So it's hard to stand out online and get people to know who you are and want to buy from you. So I
Yeah.
guess to start out my conversation, my question for you is like, where do you even begin, right? So if I'm a business owner and I know I need traffic, I know I need people to know who I am, what where do I start?
So I think one of the big things that happens is a lot of business owners, we kind of go look to social media to begin with. We think, yeah, I've got to be there, I've got to be on social media, and there is definitely you can get some benefits from that. But the beauty of SEO, so SEO stands for search engine optimization, and it basically means showing up on Google and in other search engines. And the reason that it's so powerful is because with social media and with paid ads, once you stop doing those things, so once you stop posting or once you stop paying for ads, then your traffic stops. Whereas with SEO, it's can keep growing keep bringing traffic into your website years after you've sort of created that content. So in terms of getting started, I would always advise people to think about, firstly, get really clear on the problems that they solve for their clients. So understand who you're talking to, what problems and pain points you can help them with, and understand the sort of language that they're using around that as well, really. So that's probably where I would say to start, is make sure that you're clear on the basics before you even start thinking about SEO, really.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. You have to know who your audience is, right? Or you have to have some kind of message that resonates with people. And then I assume, people make a website and that's where SEO comes in. What exactly is SEO?
So essentially, what it is making sure that the information that is on your website is set up in a way that Google's little robots. So Google is the job of Google is to index the whole of the internet. If you can even imagine, like, trying to start that and trying to look at all the individual pages on the web and decide which one is the best result for that particular search query. So Google's customers are the people that are doing the searches, and Google's little robots go out and crawl through the whole internet, and they try and decide basically where to put these pages. So Google has an index, and you think about that like a library, and then Google's little robots are trying to decide where each individual web page fits into that library, and what the content's about. And years ago, the bots weren't as clever, so you could then do things like stuffing loads of keywords into a web page, and that would work and you would show up on Google. Whereas now things are a lot smarter, the bots are a lot more clever, and with AI coming out, that is changing as well. But it still essentially is that the information on your website needs to be set up in a structured way that helps Google to be able to read it and to make sense, and to make sense to people as well. So it's not just about, I would always say with SEO, think of it from the people first and foremost. Write stuff for users and make sure your content is optimized for your users and for your customers or potential customers. And then there are certain places where you can make sure that the information is in the right places on your website. So that's more of the sort of the technical part of it. But in terms of actually getting started, it's making sure that you understand, you give each page of your website a job, an individual job in terms of what you want it to actually show up in Google for. And then you just structure the information on your page in a way that helps those bots to understand it, really.
Well, how does it know what's on your page? Is it reading like the headlines, or is it
Yeah.
reading the URL? Is it all of those things?
Yeah, so Google is getting smarter in terms of the fact that it can now starting to index audio content and things like that. So there is that part of it as well. But fundamentally, Google understands the text on your website, understands what the content is, and it will read. And there's certain things that when we build a website builders are obviously all based on code. So the back end of what's going on is all about code, and the code that's built into your website builder will then tell Google, like, for example, we have something called a H1 heading. And ideally on each page of your website, ideally, it's not quite as critical as it used to be, but ideally you only want one H1 heading, because that will then tell Google this page is about this particular thing. So we would try and identify something that people are searching for, that there's not so much competition around. So that's where your keywords would come in. And you would essentially then make sure that your headline of your page, your H1 heading, aligns with the thing that people are searching for. So that's part of how you do it. And then also there are other places on your page, so like the URL, so making sure the bit after the slash in the web address of that particular page, have your keywords in there as well. And your images. So when you build out a website now, there's something called image alt text, which is first and foremost for accessibility. So it helps people who are using screen readers for whatever reason. It helps them to understand what that image is about. But that also is a signal for SEO for Google as well. So there's other places as well in your page. Primarily, it's throughout your content that's where you need to have those keywords mentioned, because then as the bots read through the page, then they can understand this is what this page is about, and then know where that goes into the Google's index, really.
That all makes sense. And I've built a couple of web pages myself. I built my own web page at this point in time, my current one. And it's good to know that you should pay attention to all those things when you're doing that, right?
Yeah,
Some of those items you're just not familiar with if you're not doing it every day, and you kind of glaze over it. So
yeah,
good to know to pay
absolutely.
attention, or I guess to hire someone like you, right? That can help make
I,
it work better and look better and show up on the search page.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where it can sometimes be helpful just to have some guidance from a professional in terms of, especially if you are just starting out and you're literally doing everything yourself in your business, then I think it's good to understand the foundations of SEO, but it might not be at that point that you then want to take it further. I always think it's good to set up the foundations from the start, but there's so many other things that we have to do as we're building out our websites and building our businesses that sometimes that isn't the priority. Whereas once your website's been live for a while, and I would say if you are creating content like blogs and podcasts and things like that, it's really important to understand how to make the most of that content to show up on Google. But it's something that if your website has been live for a while, that will help, because new domains, new websites are always going to be tougher to rank, just purely for the fact that they don't have links coming in. Google doesn't see it as a trusted authority. So that's why, sometimes it is better to wait. But I always think as kind of I'm contradicting myself really there, but it is good to know the foundations, but it may not necessarily be, sometimes, yeah, you have to get started doing it
Yeah,
yourself,
I mean,
really.
we're all doing, especially if you're first get started, you're wearing all the hats, right? Marketing,
Yeah, absolutely.
sales, you're doing all the things, and so it's hard to
Yeah,
know all the stuff about
yeah,
what you know. And I like to tell people, if you don't know something, go find someone that does,
yeah,
or take a course, or read about it, or try to find a way to learn about it, because you are, until you get to the point where you can outsource some of those things or collaborate or hire a contractor or whatever it is, you have to do it on your own, and you have
Yeah,
to find a way to figure it out. So that's
absolutely.
great to know. So, okay, so we have our webpage. I know that's really important, but when it comes to revenue, right, you not only want people to know who you are, but you want them to actually purchase from you. And that's where conversion rate comes into place, right? Like when it comes to people who see you, how many of those people actually want to do business with you? And I would love to know your thoughts on exactly how you feel about what the conversion rate is, like what's a good conversion rate, and how to optimize with that.
So that in terms of good conversion rate, that's another probably question where the answer is it depends. So it depends on the industry, it depends on your business, it depends on what stage you're at, really. I always encourage people to try and measure against themselves or measure against a business. So the only way you can really know how you're doing is if somebody else has got almost an identical business to yours, and they're at the same point, and you know how they're doing on their conversion rate. Generally, conversion rates are really low, and if somebody was having a 1% conversion rate, then you wouldn't think that was too terrible for a business that was, if a business is just getting started, that wouldn't be a bad place to start, really. So, ideally, yeah, I'm not even going to say ideally, because it depends so much on different industries. So it's something that I think having that expectation that it's going to be low is helpful, because then you at least understand, okay, yeah, I'm not doing terribly, I just haven't had enough people come through to my website, really. So
Well, I mean, I feel like that's comforting to know that conversion rate shouldn't be high right out the bat. Like, why isn't everyone purchasing from me? And I guess too, it depends on what you're considering a conversion for yourself, right? Is it a click? Is it a purchase? Is it a book a call, or whatever that is? So,
yeah.
um, what are some common mistakes people have about they come across with the conversion rate that you've seen?
So I think the biggest thing is not being clear. I think that's one of the issues is and it's really hard when we're doing it for ourselves. It's really hard to kind of get out of your own head and to see it from the eyes of somebody who doesn't know you. So I think that would be my biggest thing, is like, when I'm a big fan of Donald Miller, and he talks about when somebody lands on your website, you've got, they reckon, 3 seconds. I think it's less than that even now, really. But people need to know immediately from looking at that section at the top of your website. So we call that the hero section, and they need to know immediately what you do, how it's going to make their life better, and what they need to do to get it. And that's the thing that I think that is the biggest conversion rate issue, is the fact that we're not clear enough. So the goal for each section of our website is to just keep people scrolling to the next section, to the next section, to the next section, until they actually take that action that we want them to take. And having just one clear action on a page is really important as well. So ideally, each page does just have one button that is repeated down the page, so that people understand what action you want them to take. Because if there's too much for people to do, too much choice, then they're not going to take that action anyway, really.
That makes that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like the whole concept of having someone else look at your site and giving you feedback of like, does this make sense? It's really hard. I can tell you, as someone who designed things in the past, to hand it off to someone else and be like, what do you think about this? And really take their opinion to heart, because you're not the one using your website, right? Even though you might have made it or you've influenced it, but does it
Yeah.
make sense to someone else? Does that customer journey along the way make sense? Like, if you can get someone else's opinion, I think that's helpful.
Yeah, yeah.
But definitely, like, landing on your web page and asking yourself as a way to start, like, do I know what people are getting from this? Like, what's my
Yeah.
headline, right? Is it what I want to portray? And if not, maybe time to take a consideration into changing it to something else.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And I
yeah.
think it's also worth taking into account how people have come to that page as well. So if we're then doing our search engine optimization, and we're promising something to Google, if when in those search results of this is what this page is about, and then immediately maybe we talk about it lower down on the page, but if immediately people come and they see a headline about something completely different, or they've come from social media and then the branding is completely off, and it just doesn't tie in, or they've come from a paid ad or something, and that doesn't then tie in with the content on the page, then people are immediately going to bounce away, and actually that's then going to be another issue with conversion rate optimization as well.
Yeah, that I mean that makes complete sense.
Mm.
Wow, I feel like I've learned so much about all of this from you. And so let me ask you if when it comes to conversion rate optimization, I wanted to say this because I want to ask you another question, but I had a thought come up that was like, when it comes to what your percentage is and what your rate is, you can't really compare yourself to other people, right? Because they're not doing the exact same thing as you. So does it make sense? And I would recommend this myself is to track your own, right? It might take a while, but over time you figure out what your conversion rate is and track it and then see are you getting better? Are you getting worse or whatever it is? And then over time you'll know what your conversion rate is. And if
Yeah.
you can make improvements to it, then that's great for you because that means you're getting more business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really good as well to, before we start looking at, I mean, there are some basic things that we can make sure there are in place on our pages. But if we've done that and we're fairly confident the pages it is set up well, then make sure we've had enough eyes on it before we start thinking, I've got to tear it all down again. So if you've had less than 100 people come to that web page and view that web page, and you're concerned because you haven't had any conversions at all, well, actually, let's make sure at least you get 100 eyes on it, 100 fresh individual eyes on it before you start thinking, okay, I need to burn it to the ground or whatever. And actually, the more data you have, then the more you can make kind of informed decisions, and then you can then make tweaks to your pages as well. But I would say, because that's another thing that people will sort of, you hear talk about A to B testing, where you try two different versions of a page, but unless you're getting a lot of traffic to your pages, that's not the best use of time really to do that. So I think, yeah, having your own data there and just keeping that tracked in a spreadsheet or something where you know how many users you've had, and you can do it even with like your freebie page or something like that. If you've got an email sign up page linked to a freebie, then that's a great place to start, because hopefully you are driving traffic to that, especially if you're just getting started. Then yeah, tracking against yourself is always going to be the best way to know what's going on. And then at that point you can then hopefully get to a point where you can find out what the standards are for your industry and that type of business, and compare yourself to that really.
Yeah, that makes sense. 100 people minimum. I like having that little bit of maybe I should just wait because I do feel like sometimes we just see what's happening and make quick decision to just be like, this isn't working. I got to do something else. But sometimes you have to give it time
Yeah,
to work in itself,
yeah.
or if maybe people aren't even coming to your website, right? So back to the SEO or even just promoting yourself in other places, like you need more traffic to begin with before you can even make a decision about why
Yeah.
it's working or not working.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're all guilty of that, of not putting ourselves out there enough, not sharing everything enough. And SEO takes time. So we can't really expect to put a brand new website up or even new web pages up and expect to get traffic, loads and loads of traffic to them straight away. We tend to say that SEO, looking anything between from 3 months to 2 years before you can start seeing real traction on that. And that's not to say that you can't get some faster results. I've certainly had that myself, where there was a topic that I wrote a blog on, and because there wasn't a lot of information out there about it, but there were a lot of people searching for it, then it very quickly, within a month, it was then ranking on the first page of Google. So it's something that, if it's done right, yes, and you find these opportunities, then it can happen faster. But we always like to think of it as a long-term solution, really. So I think, yeah, definitely thinking about that and getting those eyes on the site before we start making big decisions.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. So with the people you've worked with, I have a question. So when it comes to revenue, when in generating revenue, have you seen any success or do you have a success story of like I helped someone increase either their SEO or their conversion rate or both, and it really did make an impact on their sales? And what did that look like?
So I think certainly for me, a lot of the work I do is around helping people to put the basics in place. So we're kind of going from just getting started to sort of to actually having those foundations in place, really. So it's more about traffic in terms of how I've been helping people. So actually one of my clients, I'm trying to think of the stats now. So one of my clients that we had been working together for about 4 months, and she had doubled the amount of visitors coming into her site. So yeah, that's that. Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, that's awesome. And I feel like from your perspective, obviously, like conversion rate, there's only so much you can do on a web page versus and it also depends on the business, right? If you're
Yeah.
trying to sell to someone, you can't help whether or not someone can close a deal, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's awesome to get people to come to the traffic. So thinking about the revenue, like if you could double your traffic or even increase your conversion rate by a
Yeah.
small percentage, you could really make an impact to your revenue because of that. You're having more people come, more people making purchases. So this is an easier way, but more long term, right? And
Yeah.
somewhat to help grow your business with maybe not as much of a cost as people seem to think. Like, I just need to go find more and more people. But if you could just optimize what you have,
Mhm.
you could get them to come to you without having to just maybe funnel more money into it or run ads or whatever it is.
Yeah. Or
And
spend more
and
time on socials as well. That's the other
yeah,
thing.
yeah, do other
Yeah.
things. So
Yeah.
that's awesome.
I think that's one of the things for me, is that that's something that has evolved in my own business. So I've realized that actually, from working with a lot of people who are just getting started, that actually what they need from SEO is very different to the people who have already got traffic coming to their website. And those are the people who actually need my help more, is the people who've already got some traffic. And we want to look at where are the places where they're on page 2 of Google, essentially, and how can we optimize that? But also for the traffic they're already sending, people are sending traffic through social media or paid ads or whatever. How can we make the most of the conversions with that, really? So that's definitely been an evolution in my own business in terms of getting the results for clients as well, really.
That makes sense. And I'm sure it'll continue to evolve over time. So that said, if you wrapping it up, if there's one takeaway you could give to people listening today when it comes to either SEO or your conversion rate, what would it be? Like, what could they do today to help with this?
Oh, so I think my one takeaway would be, before you start thinking about SEO or start thinking about conversions, make sure you're really clear on who you're trying to help, what problems you solve for them, and what language they're using around that, really. So get clear on who you're helping, what problems you solve, and then try and do some keyword research around that and find out what people are actually searching for in relation to that. So it's kind of like the preemptive of actually how to get success with SEO and with conversion rate optimization,
Setting
really.
up for success. And I feel like my takeaway from you today was you got to have at least 100 people before you decide to burn it to the ground.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But the thing is, even when you're waiting to get to those 100 people, or not waiting, we promote it and we try and get to the 100 people. I think it's important to have the foundations in place. So making sure that there's so much out on the internet about sales pages or website pages, and the key elements. So the main thing that we need is to have that know, like, and trust on the page. So that people and Google can understand why you're the person to trust for this, really.
Yes, I love
So
that.
making
And
sure that's there is
if
important.
someone wanted to talk to you about help with their SEO or conversion rate, where could they find you or reach out to you?
So probably the best place is through my website, the website Success Hub, or I am on LinkedIn. That's probably my main social platform that I'm on. I do have a Facebook group as well. So in there, I do tips and hints, and just helping people to actually understand how they can make the most of the content they're creating, to use their podcast or their blog to actually drive more traffic to their website as well, really.
Awesome. I will put all of that in the show notes so everyone can find you if they want to. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming and chatting with me today about all of this. I know I've learned a lot. This is not my area of expertise. So it's nice to talk to someone who it is. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. It's been lovely to talk to you.
And so, well, everyone, that is it for this episode of Getting to the Bottom Line. I hope you all enjoyed this conversation that I had with Jules and you got something out of it. And I hope you'll join me again next time. Have a great day.